Okay, so in this tutorial you're going to learn how to use the roto brush, and essentially what you're going to do is you're going to combine two sections of video. One video, so if I show you on the example here, you're going to take one video and you're going to remove the background on the video, and then you can combine it with a new background. Okay, and the roto brush is quite a sophisticated tool that enables you to basically select a bit like Photoshop, where you can select a still image, a section of an image, and then subtract it. Here you're actually selecting a section of video, and obviously each frame of that video over time, using the roto brush, and then subtracting that and adding it to a new video background. Okay, so first of all, if you download the assets, and then if you open the After Effects project called Rotoscoping Start, and you'll find the videos we need are inside that project. Okay, so you'll see that we have various footage in here. You can just have a quick look at some of it. These are all video clips, and you can see we might want to select to put the leaf against a different background, or we've got somebody walking across a fairly, that doesn't seem to be playing. Let me just play it. There we go. There's somebody walking across a background that we might want to change. Sorry, machine is rendering quite slowly, but I think you get the impression. You understand what I'm talking about. Right, so the one we're concerned with is the photographer video. So if you double click to open that in the clip window here, okay, and if we just press spacebar to play that through, now you can see we've got a subject in front of a background, and like I said, we're going to replace this background. First of all, we're just going to trim this clip down a bit. It's easier if we trim clips in the footage window here before we actually turn it into a composition and try to edit it in the composition. So we've got this first initial piece of footage, which is fine, but then I think there's this area at the end really which we don't particularly need. So I'm just going to put a trim point at the end there, and actually we can probably remove a bit from the beginning here too, so we'll put the trim point at the beginning here. So that's fine. We can close that now. That's trimmed, so this clip is now trimmed. We can drag it down, and that will automatically create a composition, and you can see that's just the section that I've selected. Okay, so there's two tools that we're going to use. If we go up to the toolbar at the top here, we've got the roto brush here. If we click and hold, we've also got the refine edge tool. So we're going to start with the roto brush tool to make a general selection, then we're going to refine that selection with the refine edge tool. Okay, now if we double click on the layer in the composition, so it's actually the composition that we want to be, or the layer that we want to be editing. So if we double click on the composition layer, that will actually open the layer in the composition window here. Okay, I'm just going to trim this a little bit further. So if we move the needle in here, so remember this is in the main window here, the clip window. If we move it till the subject's fully in the frame, and I'm just going to trim that down a bit further, so you can click and drag to trim as well. I'm going to trim that down to there. Okay, so now with the roto brush selected, okay, there's some various keyboard keyboard commands here that you need to know about. Now if you hold down Control, okay, and drag, left click and drag, holding down Control, you can adjust the size of the brush. Okay, you'll see that the brush at the moment is green and it has a plus sign in it. Now that means to add to selection. To subtract from the selection, you just hold down Alt, keep Alt held down, and then you can subtract from the selection. Control and mouse wheel in or out to zoom in and out on the selection. Hold down spacebar to grab the video and move it. Okay, so those are probably commands you're familiar with already. If you hold down Alt and press // that'll just snap the view back into the window. Okay, so those are the key commands when you are creating a selection like this that you need to know about. Okay, so initially here I'm just going to hold down Control and adjust my brush so it's slightly bigger, and then I'm going to make an initial selection. So this is a kind of general selection just to define the general subject here. Okay, so if I click at the bottom here and just follow the outline approximately of the subject, okay, and then as we complete that, you will see that we get this kind of purple line appears. Now you can see that it's a little bit like the Magic Wand tool in Photoshop. It will select pixels of a similar colour. I've got this whole area here that is part of the selection that we don't want to be part of the selection. Okay, so if we hold down the Alt key, we now want to subtract all this bit. So I'm going to now click, and again following approximately the outline of the subject, I'm going to click to subtract that, and you can see now that purple line has come in closer to where we want it to be. So we have a general selection here. I think we've got an area here that we want to subtract as well. No, that's gone wrong. Just do that bit again. Sorry, not subtract, we want to add that, don't we? So let's just try and add this bit. Okay, so we want to get to the point where we have this purple line following the general outline of the subject. Okay. Okay, now to see how that looks, we can click on the composition tab here and see how that looks in the composition. So you can see that the background, the deselected area is transparent, but we can see that there are areas of background still showing here that we want to remove. So we might want to subtract bits here, and there are bits that we want to add here that we've chopped off, but it's a general selection. Okay, so we've got the general subject. Okay, so if we now go back to the layer window and the view where we can see the purple line, and really now it's a question of refining this selection, so adding and subtracting areas, and don't forget to use zoom as well. So if you hold down Control, it's really a question now of zooming in and moving to the areas that you want to improve. So here obviously I want to subtract a bit more from the selection here, so if I hold down Alt, I think the brush is too big there. So again, if I hold down Control and drag, I can adjust the size of the brush, hold down Alt, and then I can subtract a bit from that selection. Okay, so it's really a question now of just working your way around the selection, okay, until you're happy with it. So obviously a bit like this I want to add. So again, I can draw around the area that I want to add. Okay, and then you can see how we can work round until we've got a selection that we're reasonably happy with. Okay, so if we go back to the composition tab here, we can see now we have a reasonable selection of the subject. What we want to do is refine this a bit further. It's still not absolutely as good as it could be. So we go back to the layer again. So now if we go up to the Roto Brush tool, click and hold and select the Refine Edge tool. Okay, now just like the Roto brush, the controls are the same. So if we hold down Control and drag, we can adjust the size of the brush. If we hold down Alt, we can toggle between add and subtract. So what we want to do, I mean, the really tricky area really is around the head, the hair particularly. So we want to, now what this does as well, to refine the selection, the computer helps us a bit and kind of defines which areas need to be included in the selection. But what we do is we put a general selection now. So if I click and drag around this kind of trickier area around the edge of it to define which area I want the computer to help us with the selection a bit. Just do the bit of hair as well. Okay, now you see it gives this kind of X-ray view. So it just defines the areas within the selection as white and the areas outside the selection as black, and it works to just keep the areas that are white as, and add those to the selection. Okay, so we can toggle this X-ray view on and off. So if we click on the X button here, you can see that that goes back to a kind of the purple line selection. You can see how it's kind of worked to add these complicated areas to the selection. Also, if we click on the composition layer, you can see that that's improved our selection a bit, particularly around the tricky hair bits where the hair is. Okay, you can also help, these other buttons we can toggle on and off to just get a sense of how accurate the selection is. So we've got X-ray, which we've looked at. We've also got this one, which is toggle alpha on and off, which just gives us the whole silhouette in black and white. Okay, and then this one, toggle alpha overlay, is quite useful. And again, this really gives us a clear sense of what the selection is. We can change the overlay color if we want, and we can also change here with the slider the opacity of that overlay. Okay, just to get a really different views of how good our selection is. Okay, now the next stage is that you'll see that the computer will start to what's called propagate the strokes. Okay, so we've got all these strokes that we've made to make this selection. The computer now has to follow these strokes frame by frame and adjust them as our subject moves frame by frame across the scene. Okay, so the strokes that we've made are following the subject across the screen. So you can see here I've selected, so we look in the layer panel here, we've got all these various foreground and background strokes we've made. So foreground strokes are the green brush strokes that we made to select what we want to keep in the foreground. Background strokes are the red strokes that we made to subtract from the background. Okay, so I've just selected one of the layers here, foreground 5, and you can see that particular stroke that there is visible there. So it's basically following these strokes and these selections by frame across the entire scene. So this is really where the computer starts to work for you, and it's just a question of waiting for it to propagate this selection across the entire scene. If you press page, you can move beyond this area that's green, that's been propagated. It doesn't move propagated yet. Okay, position. I can just start to see that taking shape. So again, by pressing page down, I can see how I start to propagate. Okay, so this is slowly propagating our selection and rendering the so we can see here actually rendering. Okay, so two things going on: propagating the selection, so transforming the selection really, so it follows, you know, the foreground object that we're selecting, and rendering it at the same time. Now, if we move along to here, we can see there's an area here that we don't want to be part of our selection. Okay, so if I go back to the layer window here, now using page up and page down, remember you can move a frame at a time. So if I just press page up to move back, so if I move back to here, you see there's no gap. Then this gap opens up, and we don't want this. Okay, so here we can start to intervene, and we can come in with the roto brush again. So if we select the roto brush, we want to subtract this from the selection. So if I hold down Alt, actually I'll zoom in on it. So okay, and actually the brush is a bit big. Okay, and then we just want to remove this bit from the selection. Now you can see that you just want to adjust that till you're happy with it. Okay, so that's looking okay. Reasonably happy with that. So just Just have to wait for that to render. And then we can just press page down and see is the to you know, follow that selection. It's doing a pretty good job. So we can press Alt and / to snap back out. Okay, and it's another opening up. So we just scroll back a bit or page up to go back a bit, frame at times. This is really where that bit opens up. So there's a section here, and we just need to subtract that as well. See how that goes, not too bad. And Alt and / to zoom out again, to snap out, hopefully. So just making sure I select the composition. Just make sure, sometimes if you're trying to apply an action and it doesn't work, just make sure you click on the relevant window that you're trying to apply the action to. So click on the composition window, Alt and / we can snap back out, and hopefully pressing page down we can see now here. Okay, and then you follow the video along in that way, so you have a you know, your selection is working all the way through. You just as the video or as movement happens. Okay, so just waiting for this to propagate. You can see again these various selection tools here. We can click on these and you can see how that refine edge tool, refine edge selection, should I say, that we created is following the area that we selected as the subject moves. Okay, so we can click on that, the X-ray view or the full silhouette view or the edge view that we've been using or the overlay view. Okay, so and again we can scrub backwards and forwards, and that's all looking pretty, like, reasonably happy with that selection. Okay, so now it's finished propagating and rendering. You can see we've got our selection. Okay, the selection's nicely following the subject. Now if we go back to the composition, so this is the bit that we're going to be using next, and we're going to be combining this now. We've got our selection on an alpha transparent background. We now can place a new background where this transparent alpha channel is. Okay, so if we play that through, we're going to combine the video we've selected with a new background. Okay, so if we just compress our layer here, so we've just got the photographer layer, so now we can bring in our new background. Okay, so if we go up to the project window here, so we're going to use the river background that we've used previously, drag that, drop that underneath the photographer layer, and then you can see we now have our selection over the top of the new background. Okay, now where this is useful, if you want to refine your selection further, you see we've still got the effect controls here. So if we click on the photographer layer with the effect controls selected here, if you can't see effect controls, just go to window and you can select it here, the window drop down, and then we can start to adjust our selection so it matches the background now with the background in place if you want to. So there's various settings here, contrast feather, that you can just tweak if you really want to refine your selection further. Okay, so usually at this stage you'll find that with the background in place you might want to colour correct the foreground to match the background or vice versa. We're going to colour correct, should I say, the foreground. So with the foreground layer selected, if you can't see these panels here, just click on the default workspace view here and they'll appear. So you just want to click on effects and presets here. We're going to use color correct using curves. So if you type in curves, okay, and you'll see that on the color correction here we've got curves, so we can drag that over the composition. That will apply that to the foreground layer, because that's one we've got selected. And then you'll see this graph here that represents the RGB values, so red, green and blue values that we're going to adjust, because really looking at this, the background is quite bluish. I just want to change the subject, the foreground, a little bit, make it a bit bluer, so it just blends in a little bit more with the background. Okay, so if we go to the effect controls here, we've got curves here, you can see selected, and we've got RGB. If we click on the drop down, we can individually adjust these. So we're going to just adjust the blue value a bit. So click on blue, and then we can change the graph for the blue colour. You can see if I drag that up a bit, it's just making the foreground a little bit bluer. It works a bit better with the background. We can also adjust green and red. And again, this is all really just it has to be done by eye. The only way to do it. Take that off. Okay, and then we can select red, and if we want to just reduce the amount of red, so really the red and green we're dragging above into the positive, above the line, the diagonal line in the middle, and the red just below to reduce the red and increase the blue and green until we're happy with it and it seems to blend with the background. Okay, so we've adjusted the colour balance. Don't forget, I mean, with this selection, it's not perfect, and you can still go back and use the roto brush and the refine edge tool particularly to adjust this selection further. Okay, adjust the selection further. You've got all the settings here as well for the roto brush and the refine edge brush, which you can adjust manually as well to really tweak that selection further. Okay, but now reasonably happy with that, so we're just going to reduce the photographer layer down a bit. So if we select that layer, select the photographer layer, you can see the handles here. If we hold down shift, sorry, do that again, click and drag, hold down shift to uniformly scale it, and then you can see we can position that wherever we want. So we want it obviously positioned sort of bottom left somewhere, or maybe somewhere around the middle, and there you go. Okay.